Good afternoon, everybody. I will be going over the ideal swing mechanics in baseball. So the first ones I want to show you is Mike Trout. Mike Trout plays for the Angels. He's a center fielder. He's been there his whole career. Arguably, he's the best player in baseball right now. So the first thing I want to look at is his stance. His stance is very compact and very stocky, and that, just like he is in your stance, you ideally want to find the best thing that fits your body type and fits you personally. There's no really wrong stance as long as you get to the proper positions that I'm about to display to you. So first you can see his hands are back. We'll go into his load phase, is what I like to call it, right when he's at the peak of his step and his hands are as far back as they're going to get. Now, there's a couple things I want you to look at. His stride here is about 6 to 8 inches off the ground, and he's also going to go out about 6 to 8 inches on the ground. Your stride is all about the timing you want to use. Every stride's different. It's just what fits you. What is different, or what needs to be similar in every swing, is this load he has. Now you can see in your swing, all you want to do is build as much tension as you possibly can. So as you can see, his front shoulder is pushed all the way back to push this hand back as far as it can go. And then this back shoulder here is pulling this elbow back behind him as far as it'll go to create this max tension he can get in both of his shoulders. Okay, and the next step, you have your point of contact. So we're going to stop right here before. I just want to note how his hand path goes. His hand path follows his forearm directly down to the ball. He doesn't do a loop or anything because the ideal, you want a straight angle down on the ball. Another thing I want to show you right here, since he's came down, whenever you come down from your stride, you want to form this triangle right here. What this triangle means that you're hitting within your body. The way they describe the triangle is the point is actually his hips. The midsection of the triangle is his knees, and the bottom corners of the triangle are his feet. Now, you want to stay in this triangle because if your hip is out front and you're making more of like a right triangle angle, your tension in your swing is going to be greatly reduced and you're not going to get as solid of contact on the ball. Now, the common saying for the triangle is hips inside of knees, knees inside of feet. So you want to keep that perfect line through. All right, let's go to his objective here. I'm going to get as close as I can. It's a little harder than you think. Oh, right about there. So, yeah, he gets it a little closer. The bat gets to about there, but it's hard to show on a slow-mo camera. However, what I do want to notice that his elbow went to being on a perfect plane with his shoulder to now that it is tucked into his ribs. Same thing goes for this elbow here. He wants to keep it tucked, but unfortunately, you have these MLB pitchers throwing all kinds of wacky stuff at these guys. Their form's not going to be perfect every single time. So yeah, he's a few inches off. It's not going to make a huge difference, and he is strong enough to compensate for the power loss. Now, as you can see, sorry about that. As you can see, he hits the ball firmly with his elbows there, and his hips are fully rotated. So he went from keeping his back hip pointed at by the catcher's head and his front hip pointing towards the pitcher's midsection to the line of the dugouts. It's a full 90-degree rotation, and it is caused by the action of this back foot pivoting. Now what that does is shoots all the tension from his hips into his shoulders. And from the shoulders, it goes down to the hands, hands to the bat, and then bat to the ball. Now this next point I want to show you is this point. We call it the point for obvious reasons because you're pointing it right back at the pitcher's ideal. You want to get your elbows fully extended. The reason for this is when you hit that objective point and the ball is making contact with the barrel, if you extend your elbows out, you'll actually keep the ball on the bat for a few milliseconds longer. And those few milliseconds goes a long way, and it will help you exert more of this tension you've created in your swing out on the ball. Excuse me. Now, as you can see, the last part of his swing is the finish. All the finish does here is it releases all this tension you've made, all the remaining tension out of your body, so then you can start running. In this example, it doesn't actually show him taking off, but you can see that his body's much looser now as opposed to right in here. You see how force and how much tension is in his body versus how much it is when he's out on this swing. The next guy I want to show you, just for more examples, is the face of baseball right now, Fernando Tatis. He plays for the Padres. He is their shortstop. Now, unfortunately, this video doesn't show his stance, but as you can see, his foot stick goes to right about there. So he has a little wider stance. He's a little more of the lengthy guy. He's about 5'11". So he just has a more wider stance. It just fits his body type. Now his stride here and his load formation is a much more, he leans back into it. And the reason why he does that is to get more power by corking his hip backwards. So as you can see, his back hip's more pointed towards somewhere between this J and a little bit more over. And his front hip, instead of being pointed straight at the catcher, or at the pitcher, I'm sorry, it's more pointed towards first and second. Now, if we hit play here, you can see his load, he's coming down right here. His hands were already loaded. Let me show you real quick here. You see how his hands are already loaded back in his swing. He keeps his hands already loaded. It's called preloading. It's a new school type of way of hitting. And what it does is it allows the hitter more time. Instead of focusing on that load back while the pitch is coming, he can focus on more where is that, and that just bringing his hands to the ball faster. Now, as you can see, this pitch actually comes down right to about here, a little lower than you traditionally want it. So when he's coming through his swing, you'll actually watch his hands start to drop right there. You see how his hands are coming down? It's because that ball is coming out here. So he landed. You can see he made the triangle. His triangle's not as good. He's a little out front, which suggests that the ball is actually an off-speed pitch that he wasn't quite ready for. So he's a little out front, but it's still okay. So he's going to bring his hips in, or his hips around, my bad. And because he had his hips corked like he did earlier, that 90 degrees goes actually to another 95-degree rotation. So that adds more power into his swing. As you can see, his elbow gets tucked in on both sides of his ribs. He makes a point of contact. He has this perfect straight leg. And the thing Tatis does very well that I like to showcase is his chin. Whenever you come to your objective point in your swing, you want your chin to be almost glued to this back shoulder. And as we go to this objective point to point, you see his chin stays glued the entire time. So in his point, you can see his elbows are fully extended. His hips are rotated. Unfortunately, he didn't quite get this back foot around all the way, so he lost a little bit of power. But he comes up and he finishes, he lets it go. That back foot's back to what I was saying previously in Michael Trout's swing. These pitchers are throwing crazy stuff at him, so their mechanics aren't always going to be perfect. But yes, as you can see, he comes in a nice easy. I'll let this play out so you can see it real well. You'll see his hands drop. You'll see his back, or his chin connect to his back shoulder. He makes that triangle, beautiful. Right there, connects the back shoulder. He watches it all the way through, and he can watch out. This is why he gets paid the big bucks. The next one I want to show you is Ken Griffey Jr. His nickname's the Kid. He played on the Mariners for most of his life. He actually played with his dad in the Mariners, which is pretty cool. Ken Griffey's a lefty as opposed to the two righties I showed you. And right off the bat, you'll notice his stance is much narrower than the typical hitter, or the previous two hitters. Now again, stance is just determined on personal preference. It doesn't make a whole lot of a difference as long as he gets out to that perfect landing point that's ideal for him. So as you can see, he starts his swing. I apologize for the video quality. He's a little older of a player, so slow motion wasn't as developed. So right, he's coming up. Instead of a kick up swing, he has more of a drag stride. So it's a little different. However, any stride, whatever works for you, he gets his hands all the way back. Let's see, right about there. And what's really unique about Ken Griffey Jr.'s swing is how far he can get his shoulders back. So look how far, his shoulders almost out past his other side of his other cheek, which is just insane. That's what gives him so much more power, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame ultimately. So this shoulder is quite literally 4 to 6 inches past his head, and this shoulder came all the way across. He has created an insane amount of tension just in his shoulders alone. As you can see in this too, his hips are slightly corked. Not crazy amount, not a huge difference, but it is worth mentioning. So as you can see, he's going to come out to his contact point. His hips are going to rotate that full 90. He's made that triangle. Let's see if I can stop it right on the objective point. Right about there. Look at that, perfect. So you can see his elbow comes tucked in. He makes a huge pivot on that. Now what I want to notice is it's a little blurry, but his elbow is actually pointed outwards instead of being tucked inside. So instead of being here, he's actually here with his elbow. And back in the day, he played in the 80s. So back in the day, this was actually, well, he played in the 80s and 90s, my apologies. So this was like the new school style of hitting, was pull hitting is what it's called. And with pull hitting, the whole idea of it, now you can kind of notice how instead of the bat being right here going straight, the bat's coming at this angle, like out more. It's because he's pulling it to the side of the field he's on. In this case, Ken Griffey is a lefty, so he's pulling it to the right side of the field, so his bat's pointed this way. With that elbow out, it generates more power, but however, you can only keep it to the right side of the field. And nowadays, baseball, they have shifts engaged, so this is really kind of an obsolete thing. Some players still use it. If you want to be a pull hitter, you got to be a very strong hitter, or very accurate. Regardless, back in his time, it worked out perfect. He's very strong. The other thing I want to mention is the size of his quads. Quad power helps generate more speed in the hip turning motion, which generates more tension in the hips that can be distributed out to the bat. So that's why he has so much power behind his swing. But yes, we will look at his point. Let's see where he goes. Now look at that. First player I've showed so far with a complete straight arm. With that complete straight arm, he has exerted all the tension he had built up into his body on that ball. So that ball was definitely sent. And unfortunately, this video doesn't quite show his release, or his finish. The last two guys I've showed you have a two-hand finish where they'll wrap the bat all the way around and keeping both hands on the bat. In a one-handed finish like Ken Griffey has here, he actually lets his backhand off the bat and kind of go around his neck, and he'll let this right hand throw the bat or hold on to the bat all the way until the tip of the bat will actually hit the ground. It's a very pretty swing. But unfortunately, these videos don't quite show it. You can kind of see him start doing it, but it doesn't quite go there. The last person I want to show you is kind of a jumble of all three of these players to put together, and his name's Carlos Correa. He plays for the Astros. He is the ideal form for the new school setup of hitting. Now what I want you to notice here is his hands are already loaded in that preload like Tatis. And I also want you to notice he has a very similar stance to Mike Trout, where it's a little more compact. He has that perfect triangle right off the bat. Alright, so let's get into the start of his swing. So you'll see his load. He comes down. He starts right about here. That video didn't quite demonstrate it well. So he has that compact stance like Mike. And he just gets, instead of going very far, he just takes a slight slide step, just like Ken Griffey does. And now his hands, I want to show you guys something else. So I'm going to keep my cursor right where his hands are. In this whole load period, his hands do not go back any further because he's had them preloaded. So now he has reduced his stride time, and he has reduce the hand speed or the hand load time. So now all he has to focus on is where the ball is going to go to determine if it's a ball or a strike, and then when to pull the trigger. So now you can see he's going to pull the trigger here, right about there. Look at that, perfect timing. Now he is a little out ahead of it because his elbows aren't connected to his ribs. But again, it's hard to make perfect contact in an MLB game against a professional pitcher. But you'll see his hips have made that full 90-degree rotation. His elbows are still bent in a little bit. They may not be on his ribs, but they're still bent in. He still has this triangle going where his hip is inside of his knee just barely, and his knee is inside of his foot. Perfect. Now, once he hits out of the objective, we'll look at his point. A full extension, just like Ken Griffey did. He put all that tension he built up right into the bat, into the ball, to send it off. And his finish, he does a classic two-handed finish, all the way around to release that tension. All these things put together, you create a very dynamic swing, and it's what the new school baseball is. It's just identifying the pitch and pushing all this tension you've already had loaded into the ball. So it's a C-swing mentality. It simplifies hitting and makes it a lot better for these new, faster pitchers that have been coming up in this new era. And it really puts the game of baseball in a much more unique point of view than it's ever been. Thank you for your time.